Ethical theories make prescriptions on what we should and shouldn't do in various situations. Some theories base their prescriptions on the intention of the agent, while some base it on the consequences of the action. In Aristotle's theory, the focus is on the agent's character. Instead of asking the question, "What kind of acts should I do?" Aristotelian virtue ethics asks the question, "What kind of person should I be?" And for Aristotle, we should strive to be a virtuous person. Hence, before doing a certain action, we must first ask ourselves if this particular action would contribute to the development of our virtuous character. At this point, you might be asking, well, what are virtues in the first place? To understand Aristotle's concept of virtue, we must familiarize ourselves with his ergon or function argument. Aristotle believes that describing something as good depends on whether they perform their function well. This means that we must first identify something's function before we can judge whether it is good or not. For example, if the purpose of a watch is to inform us of time, then, by Aristotle's standard, this watch is a good watch. This argument extends to us human beings. To determine what is good for us, we must first identify our characteristic activity. And for Aristotle, this characteristic activity is reasoning. Aristotle believes that every activity has a purpose. And so, this activity of reasoning must also be done with a particular end in mind. This end is eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is an abstract noun derived from the words eu, which means well or good, and daimon, which means spirit. Together, this means well-spirited. Although this word does not have an exact English translation, it is often associated with concepts such as flourishing and excellence. We can say that a pianist is a person who plays a piano, but a eudaimon pianist is one who plays it well. Likewise, as human beings, we are tasked to live our lives. But as eudaimon human beings, we are tasked to live our lives well. So, to live a eudaimon life is to develop the excellences of being a human. For Aristotle, this meant practicing virtues like wisdom, moderation, courage, and more. So, what are virtues? Aristotle defined virtues as strengths or excellences of character that promote human flourishing, while vices are defined as weaknesses of character that impede flourishing. To better understand this, let us delve into some of Aristotle's descriptions of virtues. First, a virtue is a mean between the vicious extremes of excess and deficiency. Aristotle claims that our actions can be classified under two categories. They can either be a virtue or a vice. Vices can either be excesses or deficiencies, while virtues always remain to be in the middle of those two extremes. For example, when asked a certain question, we may choose to tell a lie. In doing so, we are committing a vicious act, for there is a falsehood or deficiency of truth in our action. On the other hand, we may also choose to be blunt or tactless. We can tell the truth, but do so in an excessive manner. Both of these actions are considered as vicious, for they exhibit either excess or deficiency. To be virtuous in this scenario is to be honest. Aristotle refers to honesty as the virtue in relation to truth-telling. But being honest is not as simple as merely telling the truth. To clarify what we mean by this, let us look at the following passage from the Nicomachean Ethics. Pleasure and pain can be experienced too much or too little, and in both was not well. But to have them at the right time, about the right things, towards the right people, for the right end, and in the right way is the mean and best. And this is the business of virtue. Based on this passage, not only do we have to exhibit the right amount of truth, but we have to do it at the right time, towards the right people, for the right end, and in the right way. Discerning these right attributes requires both self-awareness and a grasp of the context at hand. Aristotle acknowledges the uniqueness of each individual's capabilities, which is why he stated that a mean for one person may not be the mean for another. To illustrate this claim, suppose in a battlefield we have two individuals. Person A is a trained soldier whose duty is to protect his country and its citizen, while person B is a civilian who doesn't know anything about warfare. In the midst of a crossfire, it could be argued that the virtuous, or in this case courageous, action for the soldier is to assist their comrades in defending or fighting. However, this may not necessarily be the virtuous act for the civilian. If the civilian chose to fight with the soldiers, knowing that he is not trained or equipped to do so, he might be exhibiting deficiency in fear or foolhardiness. This is one of the vices related to courage. In this case, attempting to preserve his life through hiding might just be the courageous thing for the civilian to do. In following Aristotelian virtue ethics, agents must look at what is appropriate in each case as it happens, since no situation is exactly similar. At the same time, agents must also be aware of their capabilities and limitations. As Aristotle stated, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Once we have a good grasp of our own abilities and of the context of our situation, it will be easier to determine the mean of our possible actions. Another aspect of virtue is its state or disposition in relation to one's feelings. Virtues are not feelings. They are also not emotions, but it is what we choose to do with these emotions. Aristotle understands that what people feel may be out of their control, but what they do with those emotions are something within their power. For example, an employer became angry after his employees failed to meet the deadline. Because of this, he takes out his anger on his wife. The employer's action may be considered as vicious, not because he was angry, but because he let out his anger towards the wrong person. Virtue, in relation to our emotions, also means that we should have them about the right things for the right end, in the right way, and so on and so forth. This also tells us that in every emotion that we have, there is a corresponding deficiency, mean, and excess to it. So, we should always make sure to act according to the mean. A virtue is also an object of deliberation and a product of rational choice. Aristotle defined deliberation as the thoughtful considerations of things that are in our power, conducive to ends, and virtuous. A doctor does not deliberate on whether or not they should heal patients, but on how they can heal them. Likewise, we do not deliberate if we should live well, but on how we can live accordingly. A rational agent is vital in this theory, for before she does something, she first needs to deliberate on it. One cannot be virtuous through luck or spontaneity, since a virtuous action is a product of a careful consideration of the various factors involved in the situation. This is why virtuous actions are called rational choices. To summarize, being virtuous means knowing yourself, being aware of your capabilities and limitations. It also means being aware of the context of the situation at hand in order to do the right thing at the right time, in the right way, in the right amount, towards the right people. Being virtuous also requires us to deliberate or think about our actions and to act based on a rational choice. As mentioned earlier, the goal of virtue ethics is to assist us in cultivating a virtuous character. We now know how a virtuous person would act. But this question still remains. How can we develop a virtuous character? Aristotle's answer is simple. We can become a virtuous person through training and habituation. Being a virtuous person is not a single event. Rather, it is a choice that individuals make every moment of their life. The endeavor to become a virtuous person is just like learning how to drive a vehicle. At first, you have to familiarize yourself with the traffic rules and the method of driving. But as you continuously practice it, soon enough, you will find yourself driving naturally. No more consciously checking the side mirrors every second or constantly reminding yourself of the traffic rules. Those things are already embedded in your nature. Similarly, when we try to be a virtuous person, we also train ourselves in discerning what acts are virtuous, and we train our character by always choosing to do the virtuous acts. Our objective is to integrate virtuous character traits into our nature, which can be achieved through training and habitual practice. As Aristotle famously put it, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit.